Okay, so my first thing about good groups is if you consider yourself a good group, you're probably in danger. And this is like my intelligence officer heart speaking. I'm Danielle, a scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership, and the author of Uncultured, about growing up in the Children of God religious cult and then going into the U.S. Army. And you can get autographed copies attached here. And I think it's always interesting that I am very specific that I study bad groups, right? Like I grew up in a cult. I've been studying cults for 22 years. I was a intelligence officer in the military, which means I was the counterterrorism person, right? I was studying these other kinds of very cult-like groups, the third being gangs. And then leadership, right? Like I got a master's degree in organizational psychology, really focused on cults, really focused on leadership, but like what we would call the bad leaders and the bad groups. You know, I can tell you a whole lot about Adam Newman of WeWork and Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos and the guys who started Jewel and a bunch of cult leaders. So my biggest thing is like, I don't really care about getting groups better. I care about helping individuals understand groups that have hurt them, are hurting them, and will try to hurt them in the future. So that is my focus. And I know that like sometimes upsets people. I do have a list that I call the 10 commandments for good groups that are not cults. But I feel like even the idea that we just take a cult and flip it, because my list is, you know, answering to these 10 things. But the idea that we just take a cult and flip it, I think is a little, I don't know, patriarchal and just not the way it goes. But I really do firmly believe two things. One is that if you consider yourself a good group, you are in danger. You have a blind spot. You are going to lose perspective. I found this, you know, to be a big thing in the military where like grown men in camouflage pajamas stand around and call themselves the good guys and those guys the bad guys with your full chest. And as an intelligence officer, your job is to be like agnostic to us versus them so that you can get in their heads and study them. So that's my first thing. And then my second thing is the more and more I look at systems and how toxic so many of our systems are, the more I think that I need to see, like, where does the group sometimes lose so that the individuals can win? Because if systems are not self-sustaining, they are not valid. They will always burn out in the end. And I think that the constant self-sacrifice of members is ultimately harmful to individuals and also ultimately always leads to exploitation of labor, number 8 there. Anyways, but these are my 10 commandments for good groups that are not cults. Number 1, which coincides with 10, us versus them mentality, is thou shalt not grape the children or stand by those who do. And when I say this, everyone always chuckles and says it's so obvious. And then I'm like, well, how many examples can we think of? Do we really think I would need to say it if it wasn't happening? Okay, 2, thou shalt have other gods and communities before me. I really think if you're devoting your whole life to one idea, one group, one community, you're in danger. 3, thou shalt hold nothing sacred. This one was so dramatic when I figured it out. And it was the answer to like, how did 10,000 people in the Children of God not wake up and walk away when their guru said it was okay to grape the children for God? That's the sacred assumption. And the sacred assumption in the Children of God was that this random dude was the prophet of God. And under the sacred assumption, you can justify anything. Hold nothing sacred. Number 4, your mission must be achievable in this lifetime. The mission is the thing that cults use to drive you into that position of constant self-sacrifice that you see in number 4. And cults are always promising what I've classed as space travel, right? Some literally UFOs or spaceship like Heaven's Gate and Scientology, aliens. Some of them are just in another plane, on another world, in another lifetime, in another existence, on another level. You are going to find your ultimate enlightenment. You're going to reach your ultimate goal. I think it's actually crucial for coercive control because you can't have people reach enlightenment. Once, because they wouldn't need you anymore, and two, because the cult leader always knows that it's a con. And yes, there's space travel in the big book of AA. Go check it out. Someone showed me that. Whoops, I just accidentally deleted my list, and now I don't know if I can get it back. That sucks. Uh-oh. Whew, okay, I found the list somewhere else. All right, so number 4, thou shalt never call thyself a family, ever. And when I say this, I'm not talking about like indigenous traditions. I think that use of family is totally different, but patriarchal family. And I like to say that anything that calls itself your family wants to overwork you, underpay you, and expect you to put up with more BS than you would otherwise. Cults use familial language to break you from your personal identity and from your personal family. Number 5, thou shalt loudly declare that information is never bad. I think that one's self-explanatory. The people that are burning the books or banning the books or telling you not to read things and not to engage with the outside world, they are wrong. Information is never bad. Information on its own cannot hurt you. Number 6, thou shalt put a watch on jokes and insider language. Cults use jokes and compliments as dual weapons to keep people in line. They also use comics quite a lot. Okay, number 7, what's going on here? Thou shalt never chant thy own last name. That's the us versus them mentality. Or as my husband likes to call it, O'Doyle rules. There's a study about how fast people get into group mindset, and it's with middle school children, and they are put into groups and they have to complete a project together. And the children will swear that their group is the best group. And then they'll go mix it up and they'll go to a second group and they'll swear that their group is the best group. And by the time they get to the third group, they start to realize that it's just group work that is awesome, right? The sum being greater than its parts, not the specific team. But it shows how much you think your people are the best. Okay, number 8, thou shalt compensate physical and emotional labor, because cults are always about labor. And one of the things I tell individuals to protect themselves is track how much labor you are giving to any organization and what you are getting in return in this lifetime. Number 9, thou shalt be aware of the exit costs and shunning behaviors. This is a big one. I was just talking about this on the sewing app today, that sometimes I think that leaving Mormonism or evangelical Christianity of any form is in some ways harder than leaving a complete total separatist cult like I did when I left the Children of God. Because I knew it was coming. I knew I was making the decision to lose everything in my world in one fell swoop. And I was also sent away, so I was somewhere different. But leaving your cult mentally, but still remaining in the same place and then watching people shun you, that has got to be incredibly difficult. But I always say there is no valid reason for any kind of organization to ever tell you not to speak to ex-members, whether you're in that organization or whether you're trying to learn that organization. And all of the cults use almost the same wording. We just saw it in the Shen Yun article in the New York Times. Oh, they're just disgruntled. Yeah, why? Why are they disgruntled? And finally, never mind. I did put them in order because number 1 now on my list is thou shalt have other gods before me. We went over all of that one. So then number 10 is thou shalt not rape the children. And we are back. Hopefully some of that is helpful. But I really, again, the last chapter in my book that I'm writing now, The Culting of America, where I break all of these things down and show them to you in real cults in the U.S. military and then in groups around you. I was going to call the last chapter Good Groups, but now it's called Just Groups. Like just groups, but also just groups. The whole point is it's not a binary. The whole point is you could easily have any number of these in your organization. And even if you only have 5 out of 10, as a cult scholar, I'm not going to say that you're a cult, but as an organizational psychologist, if you ask me to help you with the toxic culture, those are the places that I'm going to start.